Hello, everyone, and welcome to the True Words Aren't Beautiful channel for the Just Do Shit philosophy series. Today, we are going to talk about the concept of control, lack of control, and how, when you can't do shit, how to endure those moments where you feel trapped. So, today, it's going to be a little bit different because there's going to be a little more storytelling, a lot more storytelling, honestly, and I think that context through storytelling will help you understand the key ideas I'm trying to impart about being trapped and trying to have more control over your life and not let anyone else control you. So everyone knows what it's like to be trapped. We had a pandemic very recently, and some countries they had way stricter methods of keeping us in line than others. The Philippines is no different. In fact, it's probably closer to the draconian lockdown of mainland China. It was terrible as well because of the heat and the inconsistency. And not to mention, the worst internet connection speed is in the Philippines compared to the rest of the ASEAN countries in Southeast Asia. So, when you feel trapped and you have no control, it can cause a lot of rage and make you into someone you are not. And that's how my relationship with my ex Dana ended because we couldn't have fun as we were trapped indoors all day. And only one of us was allowed to go out and get supplies, which fell to her because she said, I didn't know how to shop and would probably waste money. Statements like those are very hurtful and they can cause a lot of damage even if they're true, since they put someone in liquid carbonite like Han Solo in The Empire Strikes Back instead of allowing someone to be pliable and flexible. It's just, you're this way, you're always going to be this way, as opposed to, well, let's see how we can improve this and grow. Bowie, Daddy's recording a video. But just say hello to everyone here if you want. My dog loves attention, so she has to be in the video all the time, even if I'm recording. So give us a break. Anyway, going on. When you feel trapped, you have a lot of thoughts. You're stuck with your thoughts, and those thoughts can be quite unhealthy and violent. Dana is no different, as when she made statements like that, which became harsher and harsher, not just because she was busy trying to manage a household with 2 dogs and 3 cats and work as well, she didn't have her own release, which was us going out, her going on hiking trips. I didn't have my release because I didn't get to go out with her. I didn't get to go out to my interests, like galleries or hanging out with friends. So we just had slow internet. We were caught in the extremely humid heat all the time. And there was just no sense of self there. No way to see the end of the pandemic. We thought we'd be trapped, and we just started getting very, very sick of each other, just like a lot of couples I know either became very close and affirmed their love for each other, or they destroyed their relationships with each other. Bowie, cut it out. So, it was very hard for us, and it was very hard for me, because while I could have been improving my own skills, I did not have the impetus to do so because I was caught in my emotions. When you are trapped, when you feel imprisoned, you don't feel you can progress. You don't feel like you can grow. When you stare at the same walls every day, unless you're one of those rich people who said that the pandemic was one long staycation, you just feel like a prisoner who is going insane. You get depressed, lonely, isolated. The world just doesn't feel like a good place to you anymore, and everything just feels so nihilistic. Another example of that was right after we broke up, I moved to the province to finish my martial arts study with one of my internal arts teachers. And that one was even worse because I'll tell you about what happens when people say one thing and then do another. So, if I was invited to stay for a year, and I was required to stay for a year because I was supposed to inherit the title of instructor in our lineage. I was made to feel unwelcome after two incidents. The first incident was while he was out of town the day after I arrived. He was out for over a month. We had a major typhoon, a Signal 5 typhoon, that destroyed a lot of the province. That province is Bohol, in case you're wondering. And so I had no electricity, and I had no internet, and no water for over a month while they were repairing all the infrastructure. So I felt very stuck there. We also still had a pandemic. I was eating canned sardines and rice and eggs all the time. You can imagine how fun that was. And you'll say, oh, well, you lived in the Peace Corps. You worked for the Peace Corps. You lived in East Africa. That should be very, very similar. You got this, right? I say, yeah, I have those skills, but that doesn't mean I enjoy doing that. So when the infrastructure was repaired and everything seemed fine and dandy, then the next thing that happened was family drama, and my host was having issues with his wife, and naturally it ended up being taken out on me. There was a lot of passive aggression. I was relegated to a storage room instead of staying in one of the rooms where they said, oh, we're going to use this for an Airbnb. No one ever rented it, but that was one of the beginning of some of the many problems I would encounter there. And then it came to a point that I was getting sick of smelling dog shit and urine and seeing all these fleas, rats, and roaches everywhere because the place was filthy. And yet they would look down on my dogs for being native domestic rescues versus their so-called pedigreed corgis and a Great Dane. I felt trapped because I said, why did I fly here to the province to move out here and just become a prisoner? Now, you might think, oh, but you're learning martial arts every day. Nope. I would stay there, the guy would go out, he'd come home, oh, I'm too tired to teach you. So I'd just be waiting and waiting and waiting. It was another prison because I came there with the goal of doing shit. Doing shit cannot happen because it was contingent on someone else. Someone else to allow me to do shit, and someone else to help me learn to do the shit that I was trying to finish. Now, when you're studying something esoteric like internal martial arts, this is not something you can learn from a YouTube video or a DVD, contrary to what you can find in New Age bookstores. This is something that requires a lot of precision and guidance, and I wasn't given that. The whole reason I flew there is because the guy was inconsistent with his schedule over in Manila, and he says, if you want to finish, I'll train you every day, you come to my province, you'll live with me, and then it'll be done. Well, people talk a lot, but they rarely walk the walk, so I saw him just as much in the province when I was living with him than I did in Manila when I didn't live with him. So, just doing shit. I couldn't have any control over my life when I lived in his house. First, once their fighting got so heated, his wife banned me from using the upstairs kitchen because she refused to allow me to get into her space. So I said, okay. And he says, yeah, just use the staff kitchen. I'm not allowed upstairs anymore. I say, but isn't it your house in your name? He says, don't argue with me. I say, all right. So I go downstairs, and then his housekeeping staff forbid me from using their own kitchen because they don't like me. And why don't they like me? Because I'm an outsider. So again, a prisoner and essentially an unwanted stray dog that wandered onto their property. That's how I felt like I was treated. No control, no growth. The pandemic, I could have taken online guitar classes, I could have learned other skills like cooking, but there was no impetus there. Once I got out into the province to my teacher's place, what I went out to learn to improve myself never happened. I ended up just stuck for another year. At the same time, my ex-girlfriend was traveling, signing a mortgage to get her own house, buying her own house, traveling, going to galleries, all sorts of things that we used to do together. I had other friends who had established stronger families or added to their family with pandemic babies. Some people, the way they lived, they had more interaction with nature because they lived in other provinces, and since they couldn't finish their college education on campus, they spent 2 years on Zoom, but at least they enjoyed being in the mountains and the hills. So, when you have lack of control over your life and you're pursuing fruitless endeavors, you will really lose your sense of self. You don't feel any growth, and then you don't feel any desire to grow. Everything becomes nihilistic. Everything feels like it's a waste. You can't do shit, and you can't even utilize what I would have normally said, which is to be patient. I had no exit as well. I had nowhere to go back to. I had to save up some money every month just so I could fly back and then save to find a new place for me and my dogs, because dogs are not welcome in every building in Manila. So, several years of my life wasted because I didn't have a good foundation. When you start just doing shit early on, you can develop many skills and many experiences so that you never get trapped. When you get trapped, you end up like me, because once you're out, you're forced to learn things whether you want to or not, so that the next time something like this comes around, you have money stored away so you have an exit. You have things you can do to acquire money so you can create an exit. And you have zero tolerance for bullshit. Just doing shit means you take control of every facet of your life. You don't let anyone control you. You don't allow yourself to be controlled by your emotions. So, if you feel trapped, you have no goal. You have no desire to create a goal or stick to it. You have no way of validating your growth. You don't even have a process that's correct. And the goal at the time, which was to finish my martial arts studies so I could become a master teacher, was a goal that seemed to move further away each time. And now, look at me. I've given up on teaching internal martial arts entirely. I won't take any new students. I won't bother teaching. It's simply something I've written off as a sunken cost. And while I get many health benefits from it, where I look as young as I do at this age, ultimately, I wasted too much time identifying with that as my sole focus and goal. I wasn't doing any other shit to explore. Very narrow, very tunnel vision kind of approach. So now I'd like to redirect to two other stories now in my life. Now, just the week before I turned 40, living here in Manila, and 8 years ago in 2015 when I was in the Peace Corps in Tanzania. So, both periods of my life I was going through emotional turmoil. This time I'm reflecting on a relationship that ended a couple years ago that I realized that has affected me deeply after going through a lot of therapy, and a relationship that I hold on to in my heart. In 2015, same thing happened. I was ghosted for a relationship that was serious, where she was supposed to move there to Tanzania and join me. But she ghosts me, breaks up with me over Facebook Messenger, and leaves me wondering what's going on. There I am, living in a shack in the middle of the desert in East Africa. I have no friends because I don't know my fellow volunteers very well. They can't relate to me. There was nothing I love to do to make myself feel better. No cheese, no ice cream, no movie theaters, no bookstores, no video games. I couldn't even look at porn on my laptop. And I had very limited tools to express myself. So, all I had were my clothes, the food that was served to us, the occasional soda that we would have on Fridays when we would go to our group meetings. And that was it. I had only my thoughts. I had a journal, yes, but I wasn't doodling yet. I was writing, but that was it. I couldn't call anyone because we barely got any mobile data or signal in the desert. So all I could do was wait, reflect, and decide what to do next. And I couldn't decide what to do for another 6 weeks before we had our exit interviews to go from being Peace Corps trainees to Peace Corps volunteers. But in that time, I realized if I have another mental moment like that, then I don't want to be in East Africa. I can't do the Peace Corps life anymore. So I returned to Manila instead of the US because I didn't want to be in the US anymore. I wanted to be in Manila. Here, I have art galleries, I have nature, I have somewhat better internet, well, drastically better internet, even if it's the worst in Southeast Asia, but it's still better than East Africa's Tanzanian connections. I have more tools to grow in Manila. I have my friends who are supportive. However, in this situation right now, a lot of my friends have disappeared. Some have gone mental themselves. Some died during the pandemic. And even with the tools that I have, when I use them, I don't necessarily always get the emotional satisfaction I would hope to, but I do it anyway because it's a means of showing to myself, once I get out of my head and my thoughts, that I did something instead of just crying about it, wishing something would happen. So even in my darkest moments, I'm always doing shit, which is learning new recipes to cook, watching videos to educate myself, writing short fiction or poetry, drawing, practicing guitar, taking care of my dogs, and while income right now is zero, and while my current finances are not strong, at least if I can't afford to take a taxi and I don't own a car, I have 2 legs and I can walk, I can take a jeep or a bus and walk around Manila because there's more to explore and it's safer and there's more shit to do here than there was out in the desert in rural Tanzania. It had its charm there, but that was not where I was meant to be at that point in my life. But the common thing there between those experiences, which is me right now in Manila, right before my 40th birthday, and me back in 2015 when I was living in the desert, again, feeling stuck, helpless, in panic mode, and feeling hopeless. There's only so little someone can do when they're in situations like that, and you don't need to be in the East African desert. Talking to people might help, but it won't resolve things. You might even feel worse because some of those people you talk to do not have the tools or the understanding to be supportive. Worse, you might end up being a complainer. And most of the time, there's nothing you can do, so you just have to be. So, just to explain, just doing shit, the philosophy of that doesn't require you to constantly be in action. It just means making no excuses, but also being reasonable when you have limitations about what you can do, more so what you should do. Also, just doing shit will not resolve your problems. They will give you a sense of purpose from small goals to accomplish so that you don't feel worse later on when you look back and see that you still had time to explore. As I mentioned, drawing, writing, guitar, cooking for me, and walking around and exploring the city on my own 2 feet instead of spending money on taxis. And when all else fails, it's time to work on patience and self-compassion. 2 of the most difficult things to practice that everyone preaches, because you can't resolve every situation. And emotionally, not everyone is equipped or capable of resolving things. So, try to be accepting and compassionate to yourself, as we keep on repeating. Be kind to yourself. There are things you can't control, and your emotions, there's only so much that you can do to control them before it becomes repressing them. And when you repress too much, it'll eventually express itself in a violently explosive manner. So that's all we have for today. I will see you next time. Thank you for watching.